Today, we are getting sweet revenge on our college roommates. Buckle up. I retrained my roommate's brain to ignore his alarm. I was a senior in college. My roommate was a sophomore. He'd been a pretty lousy roommate, constantly left the room in a mess, left his stuff on my side of the room and on my bed, stole my alcohol, used my stuff without permission, never cleaned up my dishes after he used them, and a bunch of other stuff. Not to mention, he would set like 10 alarms in the morning with a bunch of different alarm tones. I hit a breaking point and decided to do something cruel. Every morning when I woke up, I'd observe his alarm pattern and how he'd respond. He had several alarms that he'd ignore, all with the same sound. He had a couple half-hour alarms that had a unique sound, also ignored, and then the final alarm had its own sound too. All of them were default iPhone sounds. So his brain had been trained to this alarm pattern for a while, I'd assumed. So I started step one of the punishment: set up a sequence of alarms on my phone identical to his sequence, but an hour early. He responded to my alarms the exact same way he'd respond to his own. I kept this up for a week, and his brain was eventually retrained to sleep through double the amount of alarms as before. Then, phase two kicked in: random inconsistencies in my alarm pattern. Some days I'd play all the alarms, while other days I'd only play one that his brain was trained to ignore. That way, his brain expects to sleep through like 20 alarms and only ever hears 11. He sleeps through his alarm at least 4 times in 2 weeks. Eventually, he finally changed his alarm pattern so he'd only have one alarm. Honestly, though, there's nothing worse than having to share a room with someone who is the type of person to set multiple alarms. My wife was like this for the longest time until I finally broke her of that because typically I'm the person to sort of get us both up and going for the day anyway, but she would set her first alarm 15 minutes before my alarm would go off. Except when my alarm goes off, I sit up in bed and scroll through my phone for 15 minutes and like mentally wake up before I properly rise. And then that's right around the time her used to be second alarm goes off and now first alarm goes off. See how that works? When I was in college, I had a roommate that I met during intro week over the summer. We hit it off and decided it would be perfect, and it was. Until it wasn't. I brought my TV from home and my parents paid for cable for the room. If I came home and she was watching TV, I didn't mind until I'd ask for the remote and she'd tell me her show was on in 3 hours and I couldn't use my own TV. Next, I had a storage bin full of snacks I'd buy when my mom would send me some money. Just cereal, granola bars, college crap. I'd go home for a weekend and she would eat everything. I'm talking literally every single food item in this bin, leaving me nothing. She wouldn't even tell me she had done it. I'd just find the bin empty, and no, she never offered me money or replaced anything. I tried talking to her about it, and when that didn't work, I decided to get petty. She'd leave her ID everywhere. I started taking it and hiding it so she'd have to go get a new one from the office. It cost $20 every time she had to replace it. I must have stolen at least $400 worth of her ID cards and she never realized. She just thought she kept dropping them. At the end of the year, when we moved out, I packed up and was out first. After I had moved all of my boxes and cleaned up, she left to go somewhere, and I left all her misplaced ID cards on the desk on her side of the room. That really is the definition of true pettiness because this person didn't even get to see the result of it, but I'm betting they felt just all warm and tingly inside when they realized what kind of reaction their horrible roommate would have when they realized that all of their ID cards had been hidden from them and they spent over $400 replacing them. That is a lot of ID cards. Holy cow. I just moved out of the house I was renting. I'm only moving out because my very passive aggressive roommate, who hid the coffee pot and TV remote from me, lied to the landlord to get me kicked out. She told him that I smoked cigarettes inside, which isn't true because I don't smoke them at all. And it turns out her best friend from another state is moving to town. What a coincidence. So as I moved out, I got tired of taking the high road. I took a piece of the coffee pot and hid it somewhere in the house so she couldn't make coffee anymore. I also unplugged her freezer in the garage and left it open overnight. I know I'm an a-hole for this, but just thinking about her raging over it is making me feel some sense of justice for the whole situation. That really is a crappy thing to do. Lying to the landlord so that you can have your roommate kicked out so that your friend can come into town and take their place. I'm a clean person. Unfortunately, my housemate creates 90% of the mess. Dishes in the sink for a week, leaves fried fish grease pans on the stove overnight, tracks dirt into the house, and leaves stuff lying out, like dirty socks and used dental floss in the living room. I always clean up more than my share, particularly in the kitchen, because I refuse to put my clean food on his dirty counters. The only time he ever does clean, and I help, is when we are having friends over, which is about once every 2 months. Tonight we planned on celebrating a birthday, but the birthday girl is sick, so she canceled. I texted everyone else to let them know, but when I went to tell my roommate, I heard him doing dishes and thought, screw it, I'll tell him later. For the past 30 minutes, I can hear him organizing and cleaning, and he just spent half that time vacuuming. Once it sounds like he's finished, I'll be sure to let him know that tonight is canceled. Until then, I'm staying in my room and letting him clean up his own messes, which I know he wouldn't do otherwise. I had a roommate like that once. Not in college, just a regular roommate situation that lasted all of 6 months because it was a horrible situation with a lot of backstory. But the main point of contention for me was how messy this person was and how much time I spent cleaning up after them, especially because we both liked having people over, and I found it particularly embarrassing when everything was just in disgusting condition to have people over, let alone live in. I have lived with this girl for over a year. She doesn't realize how annoying she can be. She's a good person at heart, but she was coddled by her parents and thinks that she's the center of the universe. Anyway, her car stopped working, so I have been getting up at 5 every morning to drive her to work. Never ask her for anything in exchange. I also do a lot of stuff for her as well, such as buying her drinks, etc. I forgot my card one day and wanted some candy. I asked her to pay. It was like $4.50. When we get home, she asks for the money, but I forgot. Then she keeps hassling me for it until I snap and say, fine, then let's count the cents. I tally up all the gas she owes me for driving her to work, plus the price of hiring a car for the day. I let her drive mine for a day, along with all the other little things I have bought for her this year. The total is over $100. Immediately, she wants to backtrack and say the candy is paying me back for driving her every day. But nope. Now she has to pay me every cent she owes and has to find a different lift from now on. Yeah, I don't think that's unfair, honestly. Spending $100 on this person for various reasons and driving them all over the place and things like that, and then they want to hassle you over $4.50 worth of candy. Yeah, they deserve to now have to find a different way to get around. I am a cat person. I have a cat that I love very much. My roommate, let's call her Jill, wanted a cat. So I said, great, as long as we can take the time to introduce them so they don't fight. So Jill gets the cat, and then I find out Jill didn't tell our other two roommates. So then Jill keeps the new cat in their room because they didn't tell the other roommates, who then told Jill to keep the cat out of the common areas, and fairly so. And then every time I try to get Jill to introduce cats, Jill tells me I'm giving them too much anxiety and they don't have time to honor our agreement. And then Jill leaves the door open and the cats get into a fight. My cat is getting sick every other day from the stress of the new cat, and Jill totally went back on our agreement to have any kind of introduction. Jill stopped communicating with anyone in the house, freaked out if we tried to talk to them, and is now thankfully moving out. But I still had to go through months of misery and stress because of their dumb decisions. So I regularly go on their social media accounts and report all of their topless content. They've been progressively banned from their main account for the past 3 weeks. I'm not even really sure what to say about that one. It seems like they were both pretty freaking petty from the get-go, not gonna lie. But they did have an agreement that one of them decided they weren't going to honor. Most of the bills were included in the rent except Wi-Fi, so I took this on in my name and agreed to split the cost 3 ways with my 2 roommates to make it affordable for all of us. Simple, right? Well, it became the bane of my existence. Every single month, without fail, I had to chase them for money. Housemate A would forget to pay me, but credit where credit is due. She'd pay me on the day I reminded her or the next day. Housemate B would come out with the same excuse every month. I'm a bit broke this month, mate. Can I pay you double next month? I'd have accepted this if her mom wasn't giving her money every month, doubling what she was getting in student loans. There was naturally a lot of tension in the house because of this, so I started staying over at my boyfriend's the odd night, which turned into 3 nights until I unofficially moved in. I was still paying rent on my house share due to being tied in with the tenancy agreement and not being able to afford to end the agreement early. I went round to my house to grab some clean clothes to take back to my boyfriend's, and on the way there, I saw housemate B sitting in the Chinese takeaway surrounded by shopping bags. It would appear she'd had quite the shopping spree at the MAC, Benefit, and Urban Decay makeup counters. Well, the red mist had descended. I'd well and truly had enough by this point, so I went into my house, shoved some clean clothes into a bag, as planned, along with the Wi Fi router and plug, and left. I then messaged them both saying I am fed up. The whole point of splitting a bill 3 ways is so we can all afford it, but I'm being left short every month because you were both unable or unwilling to pay me on time. You'll notice when you both get home that the Wi Fi router and plug is no longer there, and I will no longer be paying for your Wi Fi. So I suggest you either go to the library or start a new contract, which will cost you more as I won't be contributing. You both have deadlines in a week, so you'd better get a wriggle on and sort something out. Sucks to be you. God, why does this sound like an episode of Judge Judy? Like, I feel like it would have gotten to that point had they not decided to probably eventually move out here. But honestly, if you're going to be roommates and have an agreement and split an amenity 3 ways, then you need to pay your way. Like, it's not that difficult, especially if mommy and daddy are paying your whole way and you have a bunch of money to go shopping for makeup. This happened a couple years ago and is one of the main reasons I prefer living alone. I'd moved to a new city for work and needed to find accommodation on short notice. I ended up in a shared room with a roommate. We both left early to go to office. He'd always enter the bathroom at 8 a.m. and stay in there till 9. This really annoyed me since I needed to catch my company bus at 9:30, so I wasn't left with much time. I tried talking to him, but he insisted he needed an hour because reasons. After a few months, I got tired of this and decided to set my alarm for 7:45. I'd immediately get into the bathroom and stay till 8:45. Then I'd get ready and leave. The cherry on top was that he used to get the daily paper delivered to the house. The delivery boy would just throw it over the gate, so it would always be lying in the yard when I left. I started to pick it up and leave with it. I had an hour's commute, so the paper came in handy for filling in the time. I left that place a month or so after this, but I did enjoy getting a free paper for a month. But I've never had a roommate again. Yeah, I don't really know where I fall on this one because it sounds like they're both leaving around the same time in the morning and getting up at the same time. So something's got to give somewhere. Someone's got to be willing to compromise. This one seems a little too petty and maybe a little self absorbed. Let me know what you think. Before I read the next one, I'm just going to throw a warning out there. It's not very family friendly, and if there are kids in the room, you should probably just, turn the volume down or something. My flatmate has a habit of having really exaggeratedly loud screaming sex with her boyfriend, and whilst trying to study for economics, that's a bit of a put off. Anyway, after sex, her boyfriend and her always go to the toilet to clean up. So I decided enough was enough, and as they were having sex, I crept to the toilet and waited until I heard them come over and try to open the door, and laughed inside as they crept back to their room to stew in their juices. Don't say I didn't warn you. That one's pretty freaking nasty, but I guess if you don't want to listen to your roommates having, some long, over exaggerated fun for hours on end, you gotta come up with some creative solutions to, at least lessen it a little bit. Moving on. My old college roommate didn't know how to cook or do dishes and didn't go food shopping much. This led to him eating my food, especially my leftovers, as those were prepared meals. I would use my leftovers to meal prep for the week and told him to stop it as it was expensive as well as inconvenient. The behavior did not stop, and he actually seemed to be eating more of my food out of spite. To punish him, I baked a chocolate cake with habanero peppers and mixed the frosting with wasabi. I labeled it with my name and a bold "do not eat" and waited. This guy has a very low tolerance for spicy foods, so I thought he would take one bite and quickly realize the error of his ways. About 2 days later, him and a couple of his friends got really drunk while I was at work and decided to dig into my food. Somehow, they ate about a third of it before realizing, and when they inevitably went to throw up from drinking and eating spicy foods, got hit by the cake a second time. Don't know for sure, but it couldn't have felt good coming out the back end. When he asked me why I made this monstrosity, I told him I found a chocolate habanero recipe online that I wanted to try. He stopped eating my cooking after that. I feel like I've heard similar stories about the break room fridge at work. If someone tells you not to eat their food, don't eat their freaking food. That's what you get. I inherited a horrible roommate when I took over a lease. This person never cleaned, borrowed my dishes without cleaning, borrowed my food in the fridge, and was generally a nasty person who was not even willing to talk about the issues. They would crank up the music when I knocked on the door to try and initiate a conversation. One habit this person had was to toss their key on the kitchen counter as soon as they came in, kitchen counter being right next to the entrance. So I started filing down one of the teeth of the key so subtly as to not be detectable. After a few days, the keys wouldn't work so well, so eventually it would have to be replaced for $10 per apartment policy. This went on for about 4 keys until they finally decided to move out for other reasons. I guess that's one way to quietly get someone to move out, but I don't understand what it is about roommates quote unquote borrowing things and not being able to clean up after themselves and then just to turn up the music to try to avoid having a conversation with their roommate. Clearly, that person just shouldn't be a roommate to anybody other than themselves. One of my roommates had this stupid, unexplainable habit of getting up in the middle of the night to pee in the toilet but would not flush it. No one knew why. It was just something he didn't do. Anyway, you can imagine our disgust when the two of us, other roommates, woke up in the morning to see it. So this goes on for a couple weeks. Not every night, thankfully, and sometimes he was the first to get up, so he had to deal with it himself. But one day, while he's gone, my other roommate and I are complaining about him, and we hatch a plan. That night, after No Flush, our nickname for him, goes to sleep, we take a sheet of plastic wrap and very carefully wrap the toilet with it so it's perfectly stretched over the bowl. It was totally transparent. Then we went to bed. Later that night, we were awakened to the screams of, "Oh my god, what's happening?" Sweet revenge. After that, he always flushed the toilet after using it. That one seems exceptionally petty, honestly. They didn't explain in the story whether or not anybody had said anything to him, but I hope that they did at the very least say something to him, because if not, this one seems a little bit uncalled for. A few years ago, I was renting a small 2-bedroom place with my brother. He was very social, while I was more introverted, so he would often bring friends I had never met over to hang out. Since in the summer it was extremely hot and we didn't have AC, it was pretty common that we would both just hang out in our underwear as a way to beat the heat. So I would be hanging out in my underwear, watching TV or playing video games, and my brother would walk in with anywhere from 2 to 4 people. I would get up and put on a shirt and shorts, then sometimes come back out to hang out with everyone depending on my mood. After they left, I would tell my brother, "Hey, I don't care if you're having people over. Bring over whoever you want, whenever you want. Just shoot me a text so I know to be decent." Every time, he would agree to do so, then just show up with friends and no warning again the next time. Well, eventually, I got tired of the situation and plotted some petty revenge. The next time my brother showed up with a few friends and I was in my underwear, I just sat there. For the next 3 or so hours, I just sat in the middle of the living room playing video games in my underwear, occasionally talking to the other people. No one said anything, but I'm sure everyone felt awkward about it. The time after that, same thing, only this time I was watching Netflix. So 3 or 4 of us sitting in the living room watching Netflix with me in my underwear and everyone else fully dressed. Every time my brother brought people around unannounced, I refused to get dressed. and no one ever called me out on it. After a couple weeks of this, my brother suddenly started texting me when he was bringing people over. He never brought someone over unannounced again, and no one ever walked in to see me chilling in my underwear again. Well, that's one way to get the point across, and clearly they had tried communicating with their brother to try to sort this whole thing out, and when he didn't hold up his end of the agreement, they clearly made a point. And finally, the brother learned something from it. I'm just surprised it took that many times to actually sort it out, because that had to have been awkward. College student here living in an apartment of 5 guys. For the most part, we all get along and are good friends. However, there is one of us who frequently uses the kitchen, always leaves a huge mess, and never cleans it up. The rest of us have brought up the issue multiple times, and he always just brushes off. Well, me and one of my other roommates finally had enough and decided to take matters into our own hands. We decided to do a deep clean of the kitchen, except instead of throwing away the trash, we threw it in his room. If he won't clean the kitchen, let's see if he'll clean his room. It always sucks when there's that one person who seems to use the kitchen the most, and yet they are the worst at cleaning up after themselves, and then everyone just has to clean up around them. Hopefully, they did decide to do better after that. About 7 years ago, I had this roommate, and man, she was a piece of work. Everything had to be done her way, and if I didn't do something exactly right, she would flip. She once jumped all over me because I apparently didn't dry a dish thoroughly enough before I put it in the cabinet. Even my dog didn't like her, and that little dog loved everyone. As soon as the lease was up, I moved out. In the week leading up to my moving day, I started noticing something odd. Things were disappearing, one or two every day. The holder for the remotes, the stick blender, stuff like that. All things she owned. It took a few days, but I figured it out. She was hiding stuff so I wouldn't steal it when I moved out. But I was so done with her, I was being extra careful not to even accidentally take something of hers. I wanted nothing to do with her ever again, and I was pissed that after a year of tiptoeing around her, she apparently thought so low of me as to believe I was a thief. She wasn't home the day I moved out, so I did the most petty thing I've ever done and will probably ever do. She thought I'd steal her stuff. Fine. So the next thing I did before leaving that apartment was take every last square of toilet paper I could find. All of it. The only thing I regret is not getting to see her reaction when she went to pee and realized she had nothing to wipe with. I mean, on one hand, you kind of proved her right in the whole thievery thing, but I imagine it was pretty clear to her that you were retaliating for her pettiness to assume that after a year of being roommates, that she should start hiding things from you because she was afraid that you would steal them from her. And worse than that, having a roommate who is so particular about everything. Like, I could understand if you were cutting corners to a point where it was causing things to be damaged, but that doesn't sound like it was the case here. It sounds like she was just super particular and super nosy about everything, and just everything had to be her way. Sounds like a miserable year to me. My roommate's girlfriend, Jen, is at our house nonstop. They've been dating for 6 months, and she is probably at our house 6.5 days of the week. She's materialistic, lazy, and generally unhelpful. She brings her dog over and lets it have free rein without discipline. She expects to be treated like a guest and doesn't help out with any house maintenance or chores, even though she spends more time at our house than I do. It's annoying as hell. One good quality is she likes to be clean. So naturally, our shared bathroom is overflowing with her nice and expensive beauty products. To get my jollies every morning, I use all of them, in extreme excess. Shampoo for brunettes that will shine and brighten my curls that I don't have? I'll take 5 times the amount needed. Peach exfoliating body wash with microbeads that makes me smell like a princess? Pour it all over my body. Coconut conditioner that will give me all day long lasting volume? Just squeeze the bottle right on top of my head. I end up walking out of the bathroom shining like a sunset and smelling like a unicorn. I mean, that's one way to get back at someone being annoying, but I do seriously hope that the boyfriend of this super high maintenance girlfriend decided to do something about her eventually, because that's got to be annoying to live with in general, whether you are a roommate or the boyfriend himself. Because eventually she could just move in completely and officially and not be spending, the other half day at her place. And then is she actually going to step up and act like a proper housemate, or is she just going to act like a princess? I don't mind when my roommates borrow my stuff. We've all been there. All I ask is that they replace what they take. It's as simple as that. Unfortunately, my roommate doesn't seem to get this. She keeps taking my stuff, and when I ask her to please replace everything she takes, she'll buy one new thing and forget to do it the next time, despite having more money than me. I eventually snapped when I wanted to wash my clothes but only found an empty box that used to contain my washing powder. I had told her over and over to not use my washing powder if she wasn't going to replace it, and I just had enough. I bought a new box of washing powder and some fabric dye, mixed it with a bit of the washing powder, and dumped it into the box. When the dye is dry, it looks like washing powder, especially if you're not expecting it. I took my new box of washing powder to my room and waited. A week later, I came home from work and saw her laundry hanging outside, all with a mysterious pink color. She stomped up to me and demanded to know what I had done. I told her I was going to dye my own clothes, and someone had told me the shade would be lighter if I mixed it with powder, then asked her why she used it when it had clearly been in a box with my name on it. I don't think she believed me, but she finally got the message. She almost never takes my stuff anymore, and when she does, she's quick to replace it. Nothing like a little petty revenge to finally get your freaking point across. And honestly, like, laundry detergent powder is not cheap. Nothing like going to do your laundry thinking that you have loads of laundry detergent left and it's just empty after talking to your roommate for months about that item and all the other things that they constantly borrow but hardly ever replace. Well, I have to say, after being a roommate myself in a couple of different scenarios, I'm pretty thankful that I've only ever really had one sort of extreme roommate experience, and it was that messy dude that I talked about earlier in the video, but nothing nearly as bad as some of these stories, to be honest. If you've ever had the displeasure of having a horrible roommate, let me know the story down in the comments below.